I think really at the moment we've just got to focus getting back to a position where at the beginning of the season the fans and the directors think that we've got at least a 50-50 chance of beating Celtic, and I think once we get back to at least our natural position in Scottish football, we can then talk about the broader aspects outside of Scottish football. And I think it's also very important for Celtic. I think Celtic recognise that they need a strong Rangers. Scottish football, you could argue Scottish football could survive without Rangers and Celtic. I think it'd be quite a competitive league if neither of us were there. But you can't have a strong Rangers or a strong Celtic without the other. It's very, very important for Scottish football that we get back together and have that healthy competitive league.
Would you be looking to employ more of a scouting network, especially with so many players out of contract in the summer? Is that something that is a priority?
I think it's critical, and the sad thing is, we seem to have the same discussion every 3 years. We talk about how critical it is. If I go back to the development of Murray Park, and the whole idea behind it was so critical for Rangers to have that. And I think, if you look at what's happened over the last couple of years as Rangers have come through the lower leagues, that was a chance for some of these youngsters to come through to get comfortable playing for Rangers, because it is a big challenge very often for a youngster who's very, very talented soccer player to come and play for Rangers and get used to having to win every week. In the Premier League that was particularly tough. He was a chance to go through the third division, the second division, the first division and bring them through, and we didn't do it. If you take right now, we know we've got a squad of players, and all credit to them, for trying to get out there doing that. But for the amount of money Rangers are spending, we really should have won that league fairly comfortably. And we're not in a situation where we're looking forward to going into the Premier League, and we feel enough of these youngsters have come through. So it's a failure with the system going right back to, in fact, quite frankly, Murray Park has never worked. If you look at the investment that we put into it, and I think a large part of my initial funds invested in the club, the £20 million, went into Murray Park. And I think the return we've had from that really has been quite miserable. So we're kind of back again to repeating it's critical, but this time we really have to give it some particular attention and get it right.
So because of that, how important is the youth structure going to be to your long-term plans?
I think it's absolutely critical. I think for us, because if we don't get the Scottish youngsters both wanting to play for Rangers and seeing the opportunity to play for Rangers, then this cycle can continue to repeat itself.
And there's a lot of players out of contract in the summer. Are you going to be looking at those contracts and maybe looking to put in new contracts for players in that position, or would you rather someone came in and started afresh, or Stuart McCall had a fresh squad from the summer?
I think the manager's got to do that. I think if you look at the number of players out of contract, and I don't want to be unkind to any of the players, I haven't really seen the players play. There's no game shown in South Africa at all, so tonight I'm going to see them for the second time or third time live. But the fact is the club is not being performing for the level of wages that Rangers are paying. The fact is the club is not performing. So in a certain sense there's an opportunity in the players going out in the sense that one can recycle the contracts into other players, or alternatively the players are hungry enough that they should be working really, really hard during these playoffs to make sure that their contracts are renewed. But ultimately that's going to be the decision for the manager.
Regardless of whether the team are in the Premiership or the Championship, will you still be recruiting players to play at a Premiership standard that could take the club up and then compete?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely critical. In fact, we had a chat about that this morning. It's very, very important that if it turns out the Rangers do play in the Championship next year, that we're going with the mentality of building a team that can step up to the Premier League. What we don't want is a team that's capable of winning the Championship, but we feel you then have to replace to compete in the Premier League. So the strategy we've got, whether we're in the Premier League or whether in the Championship, is to get Premier League quality players.
I think it's been mentioned a few times, but seeking the advice of former Rangers players like Walter Smith, like John Gregg, with regard to the direction the club should go in, is that something, are they people that you want to bring back into how the club is run?
I think that's difficult. I think that with Walter Smith and John Gregg are kind of two different animals. I think in that sense. As far as John Gregg is concerned, I think it's very, very important. Certainly in my view, that someone like John Gregg is seen. He represents the history of the club, and he represents the value system that I think we all want to take the club back to. And I see that as more the iconic, symbolic status of having John Gregg and having someone that represents the kind of fullness and richness of the Rangers experience. Walter is different. Walter's coming as a manager who I think will assist us greatly if we speak to him about getting input in the type of manager we want to run the club, because I think we all know, even with very successful managers, I think Paul Le Guen is a very good example, an extremely successful manager, but being the manager of Rangers It's a very, very difficult thing, and I think that from Walter can give, I think, quite good input on the type of individual, because it's not just about the right coach. We've got to think very, very carefully about what type of person can manage Rangers Football Club in this goldfish bowl that their whole lives get put into. It's not the same as managing Paris Saint-Germain or some of the other big clubs.
You've spoken about potential managers there. Have you been happy with the current manager that you brought in, Stuart McCall, since he took over?
Well, I think what Stuart has, again, I haven't seen the team play, but if I look at the performance, he seems to have got the team playing, he seems to have got them better organised. If Stuart kind of gets us through the playoffs, I think that'll be an immense achievement given what he inherited. But certainly he seems to have made a very, very positive and strong difference to the playing side of things.
Does he have a chance to be appointed manager beyond the end of the season?
I would think absolutely. I think if Stuart gets the club into the Premier League, it'd be very difficult, not to look at him, because he'd already have achieved something like that. So I think he has made a difference, and I think there is no doubt that Stuart is I haven't met him. I'm only going to meet him for the first time, I think, tomorrow. And I haven't seen the team play, but if I look at the change in performance, then I would think that Stuart is a very, very strong candidate.
He said recently that he would totally expect to be interviewed for the role rather than just be given the role. Would you be looking to interview a lot of people towards the end of the season?
Yeah, I think he's right. The process has to be an interview, because it is a difference coming in and in a sense doing the club a favour. Because Stuart really has done us a favour by coming into a very, very difficult situation. To some extent, he's put his reputation on the line to help us out to the end of the season. And I think everyone is very, very grateful for that. But when you're looking for the manager long term, I think it is important that you sit down and have a different type of discussion with them, because you're looking about a 3 or 4 year programme where he's essentially going to have to build a complete new squad for himself, as opposed to come in and do a caretaker job with someone else's squad. So I think it is very, very important whoever comes in goes through a process where they make representations to the club in terms of their credentials, in terms of their philosophy about football, and in terms of how they see them both acquiring players and developing them over a period of time. And as I say, it's one thing coming in as a manager and managing a team of existing players that's doing well, but because of the number of players going out of contract, this manager is going to have to go out and find the right players as well. So it's quite a challenge.
Just while we're talking about managers, what is the current situation with Ali McCoist?
Ali McCoist is still on. He's still being paid by the club, I think, through to the end of his contract, and that's my understanding. He's still being paid.
Would there be any role for Ali at the club beyond the end of his gardening leave?
There certainly would be a role. I think not on the footballing side, because if a new manager comes in, you can't have someone looking over your shoulder. And clearly, from Ali's point of view, Ali wouldn't want that either. But certainly, he still remains a legend of Rangers Football Club. And I think one of the many things we have to do is try and again once get back to a situation where you've got this vibrant club and some big home crowds, and getting some of the ex-players and the legends spending time around the club and mixing with the younger people and mixing with the patrons and the various customers. So I think clearly, because of his history, he is an icon of the club. I think one would want him around the club. You
just touched a little bit on crowds there. How important are the fans to this process that you want to go with, and also how do you propose to engage with those fans? The fans are critical for the obvious reasons. The club really is about the fans. It's not a normal business. If you're running a certain type of business, you can change your customers. If you're running Rangers Football Club, your customers are your customers, and they don't change, and you can't change them. So they're absolutely critical. And for us to be successful with the vision that I've outlined about getting back within a reasonably short period of time to competing with Celtic and playing European football, we can't do that without the fans coming back. We need the fans to come back. We need to sell the season tickets. We need the atmosphere of the fans as well. So I'm looking for a combination. When I talk about the funding plan and the deficit, I'm looking to an environment where the fans show the support for the team, where the fans turn up, where the fans buy the season tickets. Hopefully we'll get a commercial retail situation that fans can buy into and start supporting the retail operations. We've gone from being number 2 in the UK not so long ago to being probably not in the top 50. And that's the result partly of what's been going on. So it is important that we get the fans back on board, both in terms of atmosphere and support for the team, but also we need the fans to start contributing in terms of the income generation, because otherwise if that doesn't happen, then the deficit becomes larger.
and the funding plan just becomes far more complicated. So I'm really looking for the fans, the shareholders are there, we're going to do our bit, and I'm hoping, and I see no reason why the Rangers fans, they've always supported the team when times have been difficult, so I'm hoping that the fact that there was a stay away during a situation where the fans felt polarised from the board, there was a reason to stay away, to try and bring about change. I'm hoping now we've got the change, and now that the fans have a board that at least I believe they think they can trust, in terms of we're taking nothing out of the company, we're only putting money into the company, and they know that we're all working in the same direction. So it really is absolutely vital, I think, that the fans come back and start supporting the club in the way that we know that they want to do and that they have done historically.
And just lastly, the last time you were here, you expressed your shock at the state that Ibrox was in, the fact that it hadn't been maintained that well. Are there plans to invest in the stadium as a whole, or?
I think it's absolutely necessary. I think that when we look at the investment budget, and I had a very, very initial chat with Paul on this morning, because he's done some work on that already, there is no doubt it's a combination of maintenance and capex. I think that the stadium had very reduced investment, in fact, at the end of the period when I was on the board with David Murray. I think the bank is such a squeeze on us that we were taking what was regarded as being non-essential expenditure, which was work on the stadium. And I think since the Craig White era, basically nothing has been spent at all. So I think we do have a significant amount of money is going to be spent on maintenance and on capex. But the main focus is still going to be and making sure that the team starts to succeed and give the fans, a team that they'll start to enjoy and start to, as I said before, recognise as a Rangers football team.